I want to introduce to Ibrahim Garcia. He's been suspended from life from the University of Puerto Rico. Even though he's found innocent in the court, he's also MST, UJS. And we have Carlos Alberto Torres, who spent close to 3 decades in prison. I would be remiss if I didn't mention 2 compañeros.
But you know, during that strike and during the creation of Law 7, it opened a can of worms in some universities here in the United States, particularly UC Berkeley, where you were trying to get public records of the university exposed, and UC Berkeley, the students managed to accomplish the same. And I'd like to know where that is going at this point. I haven't heard too much more about that.
I'm not sure if I understand you. Okay. The question is, you want to just repeat it very succinctly?
Can I say it in Spanish?
Yeah.
Seguro.
Ok, bien. Mira, durante el tiempo que ustedes estuvieron en huelga, que se estuvieron buscando todos los récords públicos sobre la universidad, de la gerencia y de los fondos que tenía la universidad, que eran públicos, que eran supuestamente para sufragar los gastos de muchos de los estudiantes que no lo querían hacer porque sabemos que hay mucho lavado de dinero y que se lo roban y esto y lo otro. Pues ustedes lograron que en la Universidad de California, UC Berkeley, donde se graduó mi hija, que ellos pudieran lograr lo mismo. Entonces yo quería saber, como no he podido leer más sobre ese tema, hacia dónde va eso, porque no sé que la Corte Suprema había decidido algo, pero no estoy seguro y quería saber más o menos cómo va eso.
My name is Earl Silver. I'm from Chicago. For 3 years, I was an active member of the CORE, which is the group that elected the leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union. How many people here are familiar with that? Almost half. So I just want to keep it short, but this is a very militant rank-and-file group that started outside the union to try and act as if we were the union, because the union wasn't doing anything in the face of privatizations, turnarounds, closings. And basically, for 2 years we did this. We fought we had community allies, we had forums, we were in demonstrations together, we were at the Board of Education, we were in community meetings together, and it was very broad outreach, but it was clearly not socialist. It was not class conscious in the sense it did not identify as part of the working class. Didn't identify with the working class traditions that Raphael and the sister here have laid out. It was a radical reform movement, and since winning office, from day one, the pressures from the AFT, the pressures from city government, the pressures from state legislators led them to, and these are people that I helped to elect, we helped to elect. They won 12,000 votes as a brand new caucus, showing that the teachers really wanted to fight, wanted to resist. And step by step, it's been a retreat and a retreat under these pressures because there's no socialist core to it that says this is we are part of the working class. And I think that's absolutely central, and I'm really
Lisa, I work with a radio outlet called Making Contact. I'm just trying to understand the bridge of this struggle with the larger struggle for independence of Puerto Rico. And Frank mentioned the economic and colonial status. Raphael referred to certain issues in building a revolutionary organization. But how do you see, and from the students, how do you see keeping it broad enough to do what you need to do, and how does it fit in with that longer struggle for independence?
Was to have open books. But corruption is the everyday life in Puerto Rico. So the court can mandate open books. We can claim for open books. But at this time, the administration hasn't shown the books of how money is spent in the university. So we know how it is spent. So they are eliminating service for the community, but they are increasing the salary of administratives. So in that sense, we know how it is, but we don't know the cousin of the politician that owns the contract with the university. That name, we don't have it, but we know that practice is very common inside the university. For the third round is, or maybe our third strike in university. Right now we are building a new kind of resistance because before the strikes, it was common to have a movement with third and fourth year generation of students. But right now, there are students in the first and second year in the university,
Freshmen and sophomores.
that sophomores, that saw the process from the TV and identified themselves with the willingness to fight, struggle. And the relationship with independence, I think the radicalization of students is inevitable once they are participating in the struggle. For example, a very well friend of mine was pro-statehood when we began to participate on the strike. And right now, he identifies himself as a socialist. So it is a very important process of radicalization, although the independence and socialist movement have a lot of influence in the university. The political organizations are the ones that promote the development of the student movement. The truth is there are other kinds of students that don't identify themselves with a specific political ideology. They saw themselves as, ¿cómo se dice? Apolíticos. Apolitical. But that is a struggle we have inside the movement because we believe politics is in everything, in everyday aspect, in every aspect of life, and we have ideology for everything. So I think as the time goes by, the radicalization is there.
I want to add to the question of what's your name?
Jesus Manuel.
After the 2005 strike, a student professors and worker committee was created to investigate the books in the university, and they worked for almost 2 or 3 years, and they achieved some information, but while we were on strike, that information opened up because of the pressure. So I think the key is to put pressure on the administration, and that open up the books because the press goes deeper into investigation, and the pressure in the administration is better than any legal process or bureaucratic process. So that's the key to us to know the truth behind the closed doors that the administration works.
I brought that up, you know why? Because I remember that when it started, when you exposed the university, just so everybody understands, when you exposed the university, it kind of like picked up a trend with UC Berkeley, right? And Occupy Wall Street got involved, and there was a whole lot of fighting around Puerto Rico. Originally, the Supreme Court, the so-called Supreme Court of Puerto Rico, said that that students were right in their actions of bringing this information to the public. But then several months later, the same Supreme Court, now they had more representation because of the administration. Then they said, well, no, that right is being, taken away from you. They're not going to do anything about it because they are the government, and the government can do whatever they want, which we always know that's what happens. But I just thought that it was great exposure because for many years, many students that I know from my time that went to the University of Puerto Rico were always involved in the same similar struggle. But you were the first group that managed to make that information public to the extent where, now it's there, so we all know what's happening. I appreciate it.
Around the middle of the 80s, like 1995, 1996, we developed something like that. This is for the question of my brother. And what happened? we developed a socialist caucus that also was the activist caucus. We don't have two, we have one. What happened? We won the election. We won the direction of the union. And when the people goes to the election, oh, I am the president, I represent everybody, not only the workers. No, I have a good job. Good job, I will not put increase my job. No, I will not put increase the union because the union is more important than the people. And what happened? Everything broke. And the people from the left that were elected were worse than the people that we find again. What I want to tell you is that we learned that this is you need a very strong nucleus. Because when you go to the direction, you have to be accountable to the left, and also to the rest of the people, but to the left, to the radical left. Because this is so complex that nobody individually can affront the complexity of the process. And most of the people that is elected in this way don't want to be accountable to every subgroup of the union. And finally, our work is not to reproduce what the people want to hear. We push the people, not so hard to break the rope and lose the way, but we push very hard. The second question that I want to touch is about independent movement. That is very complex. That is another activity. But I want to talk a little because we are in New York. In Puerto Rico, we have a very deep transformation of the revolutionary movement in the last 30 years. It's the light of this, okay. From the 1960s to the middle of the 1970s, we have a radical petite bourgeoisie movement that in the beginning of the 1970s, spray painted with red, and they say that they were socialists. That radical petite I don't know French.
Burguesía.
Had changed. Most of you are not Puerto Rican, but for the Puerto Rican, this is very important. This radical petite bourgeoisie in 2011 don't exist. Was developed and have changed. They developed a transformation and now is a petite bourgeoisie conservative. When we develop the strike, we have to fight against that. And they have the control of the AFL-CIO unions actually. And they have the control of the media, radio, TV, blah, 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 blah. And they have made an alliance because they are with the bosses and with the ruling class. And that is very important because that have a direct effect in New York. And many of the people from the 60s and the 70s sometimes think that, what happened? I don't have the floor to stand up. What happened is that in Puerto Rico the things are changing. But at the same time, left from the bottom. Ya no sé escribir bottom. From the bottom, left from the bottom, with a strong roots in the working class and in the community is coming up. And in that process, for us, it's very important, teachers and students, and the symbiotic relation between us. Why? You have a school every place in the island. The left is not so strong and have to develop. We do that, but at the same time, we are making a net in all this society. And the university, nutre, how do you say that? Nourish the process, and the teachers, not the process, and at the same time, we identify other workers. And remember, in our island, most of the sector of the working class are very unstable, and the developing of this kind of net is a strategy for us. In resume, in Puerto Rico, the only class, social class, that have the capacity to transform the society is the working class. And the petite bourgeoisie had come down, and we have an open space to develop, but remember, that implies a lot of sacrifices. Puerto Rico is more democratic than the US because we have a long history of struggling, and the petite bourgeoisie make his aportes, contributions. But they have also a limit, and we need to push further.
My name's Sean Moore, and I'm part of a group called the Class Struggle Education Workers in the education unions here in New York, and also in the internationalist group. And I wanted to say first that I thought that Rafi's point about the intimate connection between socialist revolution in the United States and in the biggest colony in the world, Puerto Rico, is very important. And I had the privilege of being in Puerto Rico for the teacher strike of 2008, and then the first of the two most recent UPR strikes, and then Triana, Marimed, etc. And this struggle the struggle against labor colonialism, union colonialism, which the FMPR undertook, had very important ramifications inside the unions here in New York and elsewhere, and was a very important concretization of our class struggle against the union bureaucracy here, which is the instrument for subordinating the working people to the Democratic Party. The second thing I wanted to say is that the point where Rafi said, and there's always, I find, significant agreements and of course, significant disagreements too. And what I like is that we can debate these always, unlike many milieus. That the task of revolutionaries in the unions is not to reproduce what people already want to hear. Rafi said that, I strongly agree with that, but this is a struggle that we have every day in the left here. Every day, not just here. So for example, the question of Obama. Right now in my union, we're in a bitter struggle to condemn the AFT's endorsement of the imperialist commander-in-chief Obama. But in the education workers milieu here in New York City, this is still controversial. We were condemned for denouncing Obama in 2008. But you cannot struggle to build a class struggle opposition unless you have a clear position for a class line against the Democratic Party. And Earl, who actually I haven't seen for about 25 years, on this question of core, people, comrades I think are aware that virtually all the tendencies in the left, including the ISO, PL, etc., was in this core. And of course core betrayed as soon as it's in office. course. So that's why we need and now that same thing is being attempted in the UFT right now, a mega giant caucus of all the opposition with no position whatsoever on the crucial class issues. Lastly, just, I strongly agree with what Rocky said, that the class in Puerto Rico, which is essential, which is the only class that can transform the society, is the working class. But I don't agree that there's no bourgeoisie. I think that even though it is a colony, there is a bourgeoisie, and the bourgeoisie in Puerto Rico has its parties and its political expression, and we have to struggle against them too. Otherwise, there can't be.
Okay, thank you.
Emancipation.
Norm?
So I'm going to take a disagreement with what you're
Norm,
saying.
introduce yourself.
I'm Norm Scott. I've been involved since 1970 inside the union. I'm a reformist. I believe I'm a supporter of CORE. I would like to emulate CORE here. We have been able, I'll tell you right now, I'm not a socialist. I'm not. I mean, throw stones at me, but I'm not. I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't be involved with a quote with a group like yours. No way. I would not be involved. I'm not interested in that struggle. I'm interested in the daily struggles that go on in the schools. I've been doing that since 1970. I continue to do that. There are many people like me, and I believe if CORE, and I know I've been involved with CORE. I was in LA with them 3 years ago. I've talked a lot to them. They're leftist oriented. They have a lot of beliefs. I challenge anyone to say that the teachers and people of Chicago are not better off for CORE having won. They have taken the struggle to many schools. Try and compare what CORE has done with what the UFT does here. I don't believe there's a comparison. I believe what they have done is united many of the schools in a struggle that have been closed. Have they accomplished that? No, they haven't. But they have a progressive line of thought. They're not putting out socialism. They never would have won. They would have been still the same 12 people, I believe, that they started with, which many of the leftist groups, there are hundreds of them, still, they show up at everything with 5, 6, the same people. They don't show any signs of growth. And if you've got to look at history, if you haven't grown in 10, 20, 30 years, and every time you do grow, you split into, there's an old joke sometimes. You put 3 socialists in a room sometimes, you end up with 4 groups. And that has happened so often. These little minor disagreements. Why is there class struggle? Why is there ISO? Why is there PL? Last week we had 60 to 70 people, 60 to 70 teachers, and we have parents in our group, and we involve students who came to a room together for a reformist type, broad-based coalition. I believe that's important. I believe there's room in that coalition to struggle for socialist ideas. There is a lot of people from ISO. There were people from PL, and there were people from my group, which is ICE, the Independent Community of Educators, which is reformist, with a lot of left-oriented independents who won't join a party or a group under any circumstances. That's why we have the word independent in our group. And when Angel needed a place to go, I didn't even meet him until, I think I know you forever, but it's like 3 years. He came to ICE because we offered the opportunity to present the Puerto Rican case because we were not tied to a socialist organization, and we were open to any group to come in there and struggle and do their thing. I think it's very important. I think that sometimes leftists only speak to leftists or sometimes, and they speak to 3 people and they say, oh, that's what the world believes. Go into people in a school, try and put these ideas to people in a school, they will laugh. They will laugh at you.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off because Rafi wants to respond to some of the things you said, and then we have to be out of this room.
A moment. This is extraordinary. Extraordinary. I like this. I think that hemos logrado el objetivo. The difficult issue is how, with that differences that are big, how we can develop a mechanism to struggle in a togetherness. That is the key. The difference between people is a lot, but the process to make together the struggle is the most difficult thing. Is an art, but the key word is struggle. We can have big differences, but if we are struggling, in this case, in the school, the difference comes a little weak, and this comes stronger, because if you don't do that, the bosses crush you. But I like a lot what happened. I think that that marks for me that the activity cumplió su objetivo.
Meets its objective.
Yeah.
Okay,